button. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Informed Voices Media Literacy Webinar Series 3. I'm truly delighted to have all of you with us tonight for this important and very timely session, Defending Against Manipulation, Tools for Critical Thinkers. My name is Shalal Mehmedli. I'm an English teacher and media education specialist from Azerbaijan, and I'll be one of your hosts this evening. And I would like to thank you for joining us and taking the time to strengthen your media literacy skills. Dan?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan from Bucharest, Romania. I'm the principal of a school in Bucharest. I hold a PhD in political science from a local university, and I'm a 2024 Fulbright Scholar specializing in media literacy. It's a pleasure to co-host this session with Shalala, and it's inspiring to see so many participants eager to build their critical thinking and digital resilience. Now, I have to introduce the guests. It is my great honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker for tonight, Brittani Kollar. Brittani is the Deputy Director of MediaWise, the Poynter Institute's Global Digital Media Literacy Initiative. She oversees MediaWise's international programs and partnerships and trains journalists around the world in media literacy and journalism best practices. Before joining Poynter, Brittani built an impressive 13-year career at CNN, where she worked closely with international news partners, coordinated breaking news coverage, and led the prestigious CNN Fellowship Program. We are incredibly honored to have her with us.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And before we begin, I just like to add a small personal note. Many years ago, when I was working on my master's thesis, I already had some academic connections with Poynter Institute. During that time, I was in contact with Mr. Robert Phelps, and I remember how much I enjoyed his writing on his Media 6 blog. Actually, his ideas shaped my thinking and inspired my research. So that is why today's webinar feels especially meaningful to me. And in a way, it feels like reconnecting with an institution that played an important role in my early academic journey. So having Miss Brittani with us here today is truly special. Yes. And the floor is yours, Miss Brittani. And everyone, feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat. So we'll take some of them during our Q&A session. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, can we see the presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you all for being here with me this evening. I'm truly, truly honored, as I said, to be here with all of you. So the idea behind this conversation is really to lean into the tools for critical thinkers. And these are ways to think about how in your classrooms you can empower your students, not necessarily with technical tools, but mindset tools and ways that they can approach the information and the content they're consuming and the approaches that they can take to think about it and apply that knowledge so that way they don't fall for any sort of misinformation or false information. So just a bit of background into MediaWise. We were launched in 2018 when we launched the Teen Fact Checking Network. At that time, we also launched an ambassador program. And so our goal was or we were tasked with reaching 1 million, at that time, Gen Zers with media literacy skills. And the team at that time achieved that goal by in-person workshops at secondary schools in the US, which we call high schools. And then also through our Teen Fact Checking Network, which is, think of it as a newsroom by teens for teens. So we lean into peer-to-peer videos talking about claims that they have seen through their own algorithms and media literacy skills and how they debunked or verified the information. And then from those first 2 years, we expanded. And then we went into our MediaWise voter project because we were approaching the 2020 elections, as well as MediaWise for seniors during the time of COVID. And also, we launched a campus correspondence program where we worked with college students to again lean into that peer-to-peer learning, but where it was university students helping to educate other university students. And then at that time, about 2021, 2022, we expanded to our resources and brought them globally and started partnering with many countries, as well as launching Spanish language content in the US. And then from there, we've expanded globally even further with our TFCN, which is our Teen Fact Checking Network. We've built out youth curriculums, training of trainer initiatives, and we've now full feet into AI literacy. Oop, and okay, there we go. So a bit more about MediaWise. Since our inception, we've reached 143 million people through our social campaigns. This is alone on our accounts as well as with our partner accounts. We've trained more than 15,000 people in person and virtually. We've worked across 30 countries in some capacity. We are also very heavily invested into research studies because that helps to inform if the way that we're teaching media literacy actually works or not. And if it does work, we keep doing it and we share it. And if it doesn't, we pivot and we iterate on it. We've launched our Teen Fact Checking Network into 9 other countries at this point across Canada, Brazil, Europe, and into India. And then our ambassador program that I briefly mentioned before, we now work with more than 41 ambassadors, and these are journalists, content creators, and influencers who really recognize the importance of media literacy and want to leverage their platform to convey the education and the importance of it to their audience. So we work with them through a number of projects and initiatives to make sure that what they're teaching their audience is accurate, but also native to their platform. So that way it doesn't feel teaching, it's integrated into what they do and how they create their videos. So now let's dive in to the actual content. So media literacy. The definition of media literacy, as defined by NAMELY, which stands for the National Association for Media Literacy Education here in the US, it's the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of media. So this really spans not just what you see on your social platforms, what you see from the news, but also anything from commercials, advertisements of various sorts, to movies, TV. So it really leans into all forms of media. However, for our purposes at MediaWise, we tend to lean into what people come across on social, but also what they're consuming in the form of news or what they think to be news. And the idea with media literacy is that it really empowers all people to be critical thinkers. And that's where we at MediaWise really lean into. It's the idea of we want to empower people. We don't want to tell them what to think or how to think. It's empowering them with the skills that they are able to discern the information on their own and what is credible, what's not, what's factual, what isn't. However, in today's world, there are some challenges when teaching media literacy, probably more than just some. But for 3 main areas that we find some challenges being are difficult topics, complex solutions, and all the various platforms and consumption habits. So what does this look like? Well, with difficult topics, so these are things that can change very quickly, right? And that is where, when information changes quickly, some people start to question its veracity because a lot, especially during the COVID pandemic, when a lot of the science was changing, because there were a lot of unknown factors, it led into challenging times because people were confused, and understandably so, by, well, one day, doctors are saying one thing and the next day they're saying something opposite or different. And it can be confusing when we're trying to teach people how to discern information and identify credible information because there's so much changing. What is accurate, what isn't, looking at timestamps, the dates, etc., can be such a crucial part of it, but it's understandably very confusing. Also, breaking news is another big component that makes it a very difficult topic because, news is changing during breaking situations. And so people will see something at 1 hour and then 30 minutes later, they'll see other information. And then they start to lean into this sort of disbelief. But it's not that anything was not factual, it's just that it wasn't known at the time because during these sort of situations, if people aren't familiar with how breaking news situation works and confirming news, gathering the information to making it on air or to publishing it, it can lead into some questionability on the audience's part. And that makes it a little more difficult when teaching media literacy and getting people to understand the background of it. Complex solutions, right? A lot of people now are more into into the media literacy space. And so everyone tends to have their own approach, which is fine. But when you're hearing perhaps some conflicting approaches or perhaps not quite in line, people start to question, well, which path should I take? Who do I listen to? If one organization is doing it, but another corporation is rolling something out versus a government entity, it's who do I listen to? How do I know this is accurate and I'm not falling for something else? So that kind of leads into sometimes the hesitancy for people to buy into media literacy. And it also makes it difficult as well when you have a really solid program and trying to get more eyes on it, especially if you're in a nonprofit and you need to receive funding to continue your work. So it is a complex situation at times, although a lot of people do have good intent in wanting to help others learn. And then platforms and consumption. Quite honestly, this is very challenging when social media platforms tend to be coming out at rapid speed at times, but also there are updates that are changing and the users don't understand it. And so you're trying to teach people how to, adjust their algorithms so that way they don't get fed a lot of false information or AI generated information, but yet as platforms evolve and change, it's hard to continuously update your entire audience, which could be thousands or millions, with this information, and then they get left behind. And it's a very challenging space at times. And then also the fact too that disinformation travels in private streams. Through one-on-one chats or group chats that aren't necessarily out there for social wide media consumption, feeding to anyone's algorithms. So it can be challenging and also leads into the fact that when you're thinking about how you're going to teach your students, lean into some research about how do they consume information? What are some of the trends? And the research can also be to kind of poll or talk to some of your students about the trends that they are seeing. It can really help to inform the framework that you build out, what you teach and how you teach it. Okay. So let's dive into a bit about, media literacy techniques that you can teach. And this will be both looking at it from the big picture down to some real skills that you can teach your students. So at MediaWise, we always lean into frameworks. And we think that this is more by leaning into a framework when you're teaching students, it helps the student, and I say students, that can be anyone from, grade school to secondary school to adult learners as well. But frameworks really help the student lean into and in a way memorize steps that they can take when trying to identify and find the credibility of a piece of information. And frameworks, it's very important that they do not provide any sort of bias. It is really just a step-by-step process that they can take to apply their skills and to identify information. Um, so, leaning into some frameworks, really one that we lean on a lot is a simple framework. And I will show you a few examples of this. But simple frameworks, they have a series of questions. It leans into, okay, well, what as a student or as a consumer of information, what can they check? What is the call to action? What steps should they be taking in trying to identify and confirm this piece of information? It can include multiple goals, or it can really just lean into one question, as in, like, who created this piece of video, or what was the purpose behind this? So two very simple frameworks that we know some in the industry use are stop, reflect, and verify. This is developed by the Young African Leaders Initiative. So this again is a very easy three-step framework that just three simple rules could be very easy for your students to lean into. Just, okay, if I see something before reacting to it, I should stop. Let me reflect on this piece of information, which means, how did it make you feel? What are you thinking? Was there a gut reaction to it? Did it make you laugh? Did it make you angry? And then just verify it through multiple steps. There's also the SIFT method, created by Mike Caulfield and Sam Weinman, I believe. And that is stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims. So this is a little more involved framework, but still as simple in the sense of you've been given, a series of questions to do, and then you work your way through it. And I say all of this, and I'm going to go into the main framework that we use at MediaWise, but I also want to hit on, anyone can create a simple framework. For your classroom, for your school, for your school system that you may have. And I lean into this because in a training of trainers program that I led, one of our trainers that we were training from Canada, who was an immigrant um, from the Mideast, she developed her own framework for her audience, for her immigrants that she was trying to educate on false information. And she calls it Kira, which is Qiraa. In Arabic, it stands for reading, but she broke it down as to question, identify, research, acknowledge, and act. So she leaned her framework into an easy way to remember it based on a word that means reading. So it's a way for individuals to easily remember as well. So again, frameworks don't have to be exhaustive. They don't necessarily have to be intense. It's really a way to start to get the person to just question and to think about about what they're consuming. So at MediaWise, we lean into what we call the three questions. This was developed by the Digital Inquiry Group, previously known as the Stanford History Education Group, and they were part of the original minds behind MediaWise. And so the three questions that we tend to teach quite a bit are: who's behind the information, what's the evidence, and what do other sources say? Really using these three questions, then anyone can start to dive into the piece of content that they are consuming and to try to really think about, where is this coming from? What's going on here? What's the intention? So looking at these three questions, let's break them down. So when talking about who is behind the information, who posted the claim, right? Is it an account from someone that we know? Is it someone that we don't know? And if it's someone that we know, is it a verified account as well? Making sure that you're receiving the information from the actual account holder. What do we know about the publisher, especially if it's not a well-known publishing organization like BBC, CNN, New York Times? What do we know about the publisher? What biases may that publisher hold is very important, and this can be determined by going to a publisher's website, perhaps, and then seeing, who is on their board or what other entities they take part in, or looking at what they may publish. And then also really leaning into lateral reading, which I will dive into a bit more shortly, but it's where you open up multiple tabs. So lateral reading really is thinking more on a computer sort of setup where you have literally tabs that you are opening across your screen. But it could be through tablet and having multiple windows, right? Open, or on a cell phone. So when diving into what is the evidence, are there hyperlinks? So what you want to do is really in an article or a piece of information is start to follow the hyperlinks back to the original source. So if you're reading an article or if your students read an article and it summarizes a study, it's really impactful to actually have, if the links are in there in the article, go back to the study and read it yourself, or have your students read it themselves, because someone has analyzed what has come from it, but perhaps that analyzation, isn't quite right, or perhaps there's a bit of bias to it. So following hyperlinks in an article to take you back to the original source is a great way to verify information. And honestly, it's somewhat an easy thing to do. So combining lateral reading with reading upstream, and you think reading upstream, what, why? It's because you're thinking of, okay, I'm scrolling up and down. I need to make sure that I'm reading everything and then I'm linking out and going up. Article. Does the article include quotes from experts? If it does, search that person's name and go back to go and identify if they are an authority, a source of authority, authoritative source on the information. Is what was quoted, is it on the record or off the record? And if it's off the record, then try to look into how the organization handles off the record policies, because that could also have a multiple, that can lean into either bias or also just veracity of information. There needs to be a multiple step process in confirming off the record information before it is published. And also primary sources, right? This is critically important in any sort of article or publication, is that leaning on primary sources, not hearsay from a second or third party, but leaning into the person who witnessed the event or the person who heard something actually said. And then also, what are other sources saying? So the third question from the digital inquiry group, right? So if it's a big story, more than likely, there are going to be multiple outlets talking about it. They may not all publish the exact same wording, right? Because again, different analysis may play into it, different providers of information, right? Or sources of information may be available to different outlets. But if there's a big story about an earthquake that took place or a flooding event or an accident, then multiple outlets will have that information. And then from there, the individual or your student can read across all of those to develop and get their own sense of like, okay, this is what has actually happened. However, if it appears to be a major news story and only one random outlet is carrying it, that will lead into, okay, perhaps this isn't true and perhaps I shouldn't share it. It's also of note to look at scholarly journals and other, again, trustworthy organizations. and the consensus among trustworthy organizations, right? So again, they all may have, a few different primary sources on a story. However, there should be something similar, among a similar thread throughout it, understanding that there may be, some variation. So diving into lateral reading, when you're teaching your students, it's really about just making sure that what they are reading is accurate. So honing in on keywords or people that are referred to in a story, opening up a new tab or a new window and checking for that. So you open up a new browser and search that keyword, find information there, see how that plays into it, and then open up another browser, and you keep finding and keep searching until you find the information from that article, because if that article has it, more than likely others do as well. So for instance, here's one example. When there was a lot of misinformation around the COVID vaccine and an American football player collapsed on the field, a lot of videos started circulating that he collapsed because he received the COVID vaccine. And so, um, through some through using lateral reading, as you see here, through looking at Yahoo News, then opening up another window, going to the Washington Post, and then also to USA Today, it was identified that there was no link through fact checks that were done, verification articles that were done. There was no connection between the vaccine and the player's collapse. However, instead of just stopping on one at Yahoo News, it's opening up tabs and looking at several other articles from credible information, credible sources to confirm the information. Reading upstream. So again, this is where you follow a link within a news story or claim to go to the original source of information. So really thinking of this as like, what's the evidence? Putting on a journalistic hat and thinking, okay, well, how am I going to find this, right? And this can also help your students as well. So again, it's about heading to primary sources that are either linked in the article or following those links to get back to the primary source. So that way your students can start to identify credible, like the authoritative source on a story. We do also teach a lot about echo chamber escape, right? People tend to consume not only, they consume their information from the same sources, but also the same types of sources as well, right? So they will lean into maybe just podcast or maybe just a broadcast TV. So what we try to teach people and try to get them to lean into is you follow a variety of not only of sources, but of the types of media as well. So look at, follow journalists that maybe you tend to trust more because they align with your views for some reason, or they are from an organization that you tend to go to. But also follow individuals who don't necessarily do that. Journalists that maybe you're a little more skeptical of and how their approach to delivery is. Because again, just having a variety of sources of people that you follow can help open and just give a broader view into a topic, into a story, into really anything. And this, not just for journalists, this goes for specialists, public figures as well. It could be a politician you do agree with and a politician you don't, but follow both because that way it helps to break your echo chamber, for one thing, on social media. And two, it really can just help give you a broader perspective of the information that you're consuming. And also if students especially are going strictly to various social platforms for news and information, encourage them to break out of that, to go directly to a publisher's website or listen to a podcast or turn on the local news and watch it on air. Listen to the radio even, But just having a variety of methods that you consume can also really help to break this echo chamber and give a different perspective in how people receive information, but also how they learn and think about and analyze. It also just helps, to really open up their way of thinking, especially as students, and just learning more about the world around them. Also, we lean into a lot of teaching click or with phones or with tablets, tap restraint. And what that is don't always lean into the first um, the first result on an internet search, right? Whether that's Google or Safari or whatever platform that internet browser they may use, don't just click on the first one. For one thing, a lot now do have an AI summary at the top. So you always do have to be questionable there. But with SEOs, people can prioritize their websites to be first, but they may not be the most accurate. So instead of tapping or clicking the first result or the first two or three results, scroll a bit just to see what else there is, and then making a determination in what to click, and also click several of them to really start to get an idea. But wanting to scan the results first to make sure that really getting a sense of what sources are out there instead of just clicking on the first two because they have a better SEO setup than others. Finding credible sources. So this is incredibly important in what we teach our students in our various workshops, is that not all information is equal. And just because it's labeled as evidence or as factual, really looking at the source. Who is claiming it to be factual? Who is claiming it to be evidence? That can really lean into, all right, is it accurate or not? Because again, not everyone who claims to be a source is a credible source or is an authority to speak on that piece of information. And then we also, back to these frameworks and thinking about questions, we like to teach students also, stop and think to yourself, does it make sense? Is this piece of information that I'm consuming, or this video or this sound bite, does it make sense at all, right? There's a lot of really funny, warming animal clips out there these days, but more times than not, they are AI generated. So looking for context clues and for bugs like the little watermarks, and just asking, does it make sense? Is this confirming my worldview? Right? Again, that gets back to the echo chamber, breaking the echo chamber, because if we're in our echo chamber, everything that we consume will likely confirm our worldviews, but it's not really giving the student the whole picture or equipping them with the ability to discern or to think critically around the information they are consuming. And is the evidence relevant, right? It's incredibly important that whatever article or post that they are reading, does the evidence actually support the claim? Because if it doesn't, then that is a big red flag. And then just diving in a bit more. So a few additional tips for when you're teaching this to your students and how to determine the authority of a source. It's looking into the author's professional background. More times than not, if someone is publishing, there is an online profile of them somewhere, and you can start to get a sense of, their accomplishments, what they've written on, their degrees, etc., to really start to identify if they are an authority on a source. Um, Look and see if they have outlined their process in collecting information and verifying information, and how they decided and determined to write about it. Are there any systems in place to catch mistakes or to correct them? Because any good publication, incredible publication, will have a policy in place for errors and mistakes. And so it's important to look at that because, if a mistake is identified after something is published, it's important to know that the organization that is publishing will go back and actually admit to it and correct it. Can you contact the reporter or the publisher? It's not always that you can contact the direct person, but is there a number or an email address that you can at least try to get in touch with at the organization or at, a departmental email, something of that source. Also on social, with social media now, it's very easy to send a direct message to a reporter or an organization and try to get a bit more information from them. Again, I know journalists are quite busy, so it may not always get a response, but at least if there's a way to make the effort to reach out. Is there a byline on the article? This is incredibly important because you want to know that someone will stand behind their work. Of course, there's a caveat that in places where journalists are under threat, that perhaps they can't put a byline, but it is important to at least check to see and to understand where the journalist or where the article originated from, because then that can lead into, all right, is there a reason there is not a byline, or is there not a byline just because it's, a little bit questionable? And then also looking at photos. What does the caption and source information say? And I actually have an example of that in just a little bit. Look for original reporting. So this is incredibly important that we like to teach everyone through our workshops is the article pretty much a summary of someone else's work? And if so, then go to the original article. Again, because if someone is taking another's work and they're starting to put their own influence on it and their own perspective, then you're not getting the raw information anymore from the primary source. You're getting someone's viewpoint or someone's analysis. And that can then, play into if by someone falling for perhaps something that's not quite correct or someone else's viewpoint. So it's always important to go back to original reporting. So looking for signs that the article has original reporting, which again goes back to quotes on the record. Are there links to the study that was referenced? Things like that that can lean into confirming that the article or piece of information is an original piece. We also teach a lot about better keyword searching, and this is something you can teach your students as well. These are some somewhat basic, but they can also help better than just going in and typing in a long string of words without any sort of quotation marks or conjunctions between them. So these are things like using a minus sign to make sure that you get results without a particular word, or if you want to search a particular website using quotation marks, site quotation marks, and then the particular site's URL. So it's just leaning into simple tools and processes like this can really help refine a search to make sure that what the search results are, it's sifting through the noise to really bring in some more credible and to help, I guess, in a way to, it will help to, cut down on the time as well. And then a big thing that we also teach to students is being mindful of context when they are consuming an image or a video, especially. So thinking about music, thinking about the feeling that they have when they are watching a piece of video. If a piece of video makes you feel a certain way, then it's definitely worth double checking. Is there dramatic music to make it seem a bit more edgy, a bit more, like there was ill intent, or is there more upbeat music to make it feel like the video, no matter what the content is a bit more like fun and lighthearted, when in reality it could be something really important. So just watch for simple clues like that, right? So audio, were there interviews from both sides of a particular instance or story? Because only interviewing one versus another can definitely alter how a piece of video comes out, and as well as the person's perception of it. Confirming the context, checking the caption as well is very important, and then confirming the date. Confirm if the date is accurate of when the video claims that it is. That could also be a big indicator as well. So looking at these skills and applying some of these skills. So for instance, this image right here is a screenshot that I took from Facebook, and it was shortly after Queen Elizabeth died. And it caught my eye because I go, oh, okay, well, I know that she liked a lot of corgis. She had corgis, right? And the caption itself, I'm not quite sure how small the screen is for you, but it says, "The Queen's companions returning to London from Balmoral. It's been reported during her final days they were constantly with her." So again, this was posted about 2 days, I believe, after Queen Elizabeth died. And I decided to dig a bit deeper into this. So I hope this will play. Okay, so what I did was I used a reverse image search, and I dropped the image in because I thought, well, I can't find this anywhere else. What's going on? And so by using TinEye, which is a reverse image search tool, I started finding that this image was many other places prior to 2022. So I found it from 2014, 2017, 2015. So in many places, this picture had been published years prior to Queen Elizabeth's death. So that led me to think, okay, well, now that I know this image has existed before, let me dig a bit deeper. And I now went to Google Lens, where I dropped in the same image. And to not get too ahead of myself. All right, so by searching just this image, I am now finding where it had been previously published, as well as articles around it. And I ended up on this article where it demonstrated that that image itself was, yes, it was in fact the corgis coming back from Balmoral Estate, but it was after the Queen Mother had passed, not Queen Elizabeth. So again, this is not a critical, not a too impactful piece of misinformation, but it's just an example of how this could have been if there was a more crucial picture or video that was posted, it could have gotten a lot more traction and could have done some damage. But instead, it was relatively lighthearted. I say lighthearted, right? It's not like anything terrible is necessarily coming from it, but the fact that the caption was incorrect, the image was misdated. So again, just a simple tool of, hey, let's use a few tools. Honestly, this all started with me just questioning it. That's all. Like, is this accurate? And then I dove in a bit. Another example about just leaning on information, like just thinking about critical thinking, quite honestly, is I came across this tweet. And this was, and so this was at a time, this was 2022, and I know this is a very US centric po example, but I did just want to share it. So someone had tweeted this screenshot, and this was shortly after Johnny Depp had been in court, and then Kyle Rittenhouse had been in court as well. And I look at this and I think, okay, well, this is kind of an outrageous claim here, but perhaps this is accurate. Also, false information can spread very quickly in screenshots. So that was the first clue of mine was go, okay, well, this is a screenshot. Perhaps I need to investigate a bit further. However, to anyone, this can look accurate, right? Um, and so what I did at the time that I saw this is I opened up the CNN app on my phone. And I thought, okay, well, here are a couple context clues. One is I could not find this article anywhere on CNN. And then I started comparing as well the bugs or sorry, in TV terms it's bug, but like where the logos are, where you can click live TV, where the drop down is. And so I started comparing and I go, well, there's a lot of difference here between these. And not only is it in the placement of where you can click live TV and drop down in the CNN logo, but even in the text as well, and the font style is different. And so that was a big clue. I thought, well, okay, something's not right here. And sure enough, the post that I saw that was screenshot and shared is false. And then the Roe decision was accurate and true. That came from the app. The other one did not. And it's just these simple context clues that it literally was just a moment of, this seems a bit outrageous. Let me just dive in a bit further. And it took approximately 5 minutes of one, searching for this article on CNN that did not exist, and then two, simply comparing because they're not going to have different placements and their font will be the same across their app and across websites. So it's simple critical thinking skills like this that can really help lean in, and it doesn't take a lot of time either. And then we always lean as well when we teach media literacy to students is also talking about the emotional and the understanding side of it, which is, as students become more media literate, it doesn't mean that they have now this right to be better than. It's about still being respectful and having empathy for others, for their peers, in how they approach it, right? So always, always, always just emphasizing that even if you are, media literate and you know what you're talking about, to always be respectful and to listen to other people and to not get emotional about it, but keeping, a solid, just straight mindset of, okay, I hear you, I understand you, but here are the facts. Here's how I determined that this is, accurate information. Making sure that they know a chat is not a win-lose situation per se, that it's a conversation is really important. And then, it's media literacy is not only just thinking critically, but it's also to be actively engaged in what you consume, right? So it's you don't want to be a passive scroller. We definitely always try to encourage and teach any of our students, no matter their age, don't just passively scroll on social or on an internet browser. Always actively engage and think about it, because if you're actively engaged, then you are less likely to fall for misinformation, disinformation, any sort of false information. And I know I'm past time, but thank you so much. And if you're interested in seeing more of what we have, this was just a very brief overview. Um, if you follow this QR code, it takes you to our AI literacy page where we do have some lesson plans under the Alt Ignite as well as AI Unlocked. So lesson plans for teachers there. And we also have additional ones on our website labeled Hit Pause. Also goes into some lesson plans that you can easily adapt or just take and apply into your classrooms.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, dear Brittany, for this informative and powerful presentation. Dan and I have a few questions to explore the topic further. But before this, I urge the audience to ask their questions. You can just type in the chat or just unmute yourselves and ask your questions directly. So, may I start first? Brittany, in your work with MediaWise, which manipulation technique do you see affecting young people the most today?
Ooh, what we see a lot, especially in our work with our teens, is a lot of AI generated content. But it's also like they know that it's there, right? So it's really more leaning into actively engaging versus passively engaging. So they know that it's there, um, and they just kind of they tend to ignore it, but at the same time, just ignoring it isn't always the best answer. It's making sure that you are conscious about it, and so that way you don't fall for it. So yeah, really, it's all in the AI space at this point in time, and it's also how to engage with AI ethically, and that it's not the end all be all by any means, but it's also we can't hide from it. So we're seeing a lot of just making sure there's ethical engagement and recognizing what it can do, but also what it cannot do and what it should not do.
Yes. Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question as well. So thank you very much, Brittany, for your presentation. I think the topic you've covered and the way you did it, it applies to all places out there. I think that in Romania we face the same challenges, and especially given the war in Ukraine and the huge amount of misinformation, disinformation that comes from that place. It's important to be aware of, and think critically
Mhm.
about the way media is done nowadays. Now, my first question for you is the following. What is one simple everyday habit that can help people become more resistant to manipulation online?
Oh, that's a good question. One simple habit I recommend is having some time set aside to do a news read, right? So whether, in your countries, whoever the, you know, trusted sources of information, or perhaps that's something more global, like a BBC, is if you do a brief news read, just 15, 20 minutes, looking at some of the top stories of the day, then when you're on social and you see something outrageous, like an AI generated video of a leader saying something like when Zelensky, I know that there was the one AI video of him a couple years ago now, saying that the war was over and that they were going to agree to terms, right? And that was false.
Yeah.
If that was actually accurate, then it would have been covered by a major news organization and by multiple major news organizations. So if you just kind of have a normal lay of like read of the day and what is actually happening, then if you see something outrageous online or in your social feeds, then you're already a little more resistant. And wait a minute, I hadn't already heard about that. Let me just double check first. So that's what I always try to do. And then it also helps build just more of a understanding of what's happening in your community, whether that's in a township, country, or globally, is just be more news aware, and then you're more resistant to crazy claims online.
Thank you.
Dear Brittany, we have here a question from the audience. You have mentioned about the importance of audience data, and the question is, what kind of audience data should be researched?
Oh, that's a great question. So it really depends on what your focus is. So if you're trying to determine how to best reach your students, perhaps, then focus in on what interests them, right? So that, and then that will help you adapt. And so I know that not everyone has, budget or the ability to run robust studies and write papers to get it published. I know it's a long, drawn out process. So it can be something very simple, as in just surveying your students to find out what interests them or where they're finding information these days, or what seems to be more of a trending topic, right? Like, is it something that's um, beauty and workout for teens? Like, that's a big thing here in the States, has been like beauty trends among a lot of females, and males, it's a lot of this like body building, and physique. So leaning in and identifying topics that are interesting them, where they're getting their information these days. I mean, it almost seems to change, at the drop of a hat almost, and is it coming from closed channels like Telegram, or is it more open like TikTok? So really it's about just surveying your students if that's where your interest lies. But then also if you're rolling out media literacy lesson plans and you want to see how those work, then do a simple form like it could be something like a Google form, right? It doesn't have to be anything intense, with some questions of how they're consuming information, what do they do, how do they approach something that they think may be false. So kind of get a sense of what they're doing now, run your program or your lesson plans, and then test them again at the end. But also then run the same questions, weeks or months past, to see if they retained that information as well. That can also help you as you adapt, year after year for your classes, in identifying what topics, what tips, what techniques actually stick with your students, and then what doesn't, and honing those. Uh, but it's incredibly important, honestly, to see not just from beginning, where they were at the beginning, to where they were at the end of your lesson plan series, but then past that by weeks or a couple months, if you have the flexibility to do that. And that will really lean into helping to inform you like what works and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dan, do you have a question?
I do have one question. Brittany, you've trained a lot of journalists around the world. What skill do you consider essential for journalists to maintain credibility in today's information environment, which is so crazy, hectic?
Transparency. That is that is the biggest skill, I would say. And it's, it kind of runs this thought of like, well, how transparent, it's when writing articles, or when, rec writing a script for a package, right? It's about walking the viewer through how you went about it. Talking, just be open and honest about how you found a source, the questions you asked, what they're talking about. But it's the more transparent, then the audience feels that they can trust you. And in a time and place where there are so many people and we're inundated with, now it's not just broadcast TV and journalists, it's people on social that are publishing, whether it's journalists or others who are, just trying to comment on it. It's really about opening, taking the curtain, opening the curtain and letting the audience understand who you are, how you approach your stories, your articles, what goes into it. giving them a glimpse into that then helps to build this trust. We're no longer can it be the sort of I'm a journalist and you just have to trust everything I say. There really has to be like a two-way street almost, and leveraging social media to really connect with your audience too is crucial, and all that plays into transparency.
Thank you.
And we have one more question from the audience. Gabby asks, how can low transparency media environment be broken through from your desktop?
Oh, that's a good question. So, that's a really good question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So, in a low transparency, as in a country where there's not a lot of transparency through the journalist, how can you break through, correct? That is a good question. I would say I would recommend, if that were my position, try to explore nonprofits, perhaps. Again, you have to check background, right? Like what is who's funding them, what are their potential biases. There are organizations out there who also run a lot of sort of like trust meters on media organizations and countries that can help inform which ones are a bit more transparent or trustworthy. Also looking globally, which isn't great because unless they have someone based in your country, you're not going to necessarily get the local perspective, but that could also be a starting point. That is where I would start, honestly, is do a bit more research in what nonprofits are out there that are searching who's holding those organizations accountable, and then looking globally. But I don't necessarily have a great answer for that.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. Yes, yes, Gabby, yes, if the local governing is not
I
too
know
too transparent, yeah.
it is it's a challenging time. Yeah, it's really just trying to research where you can. I know there are nonprofits out there who, will
Don't give up,
monitor and
Gabby.
post. What? What
Yeah.
did you say?
Don't give up.
I know, don't give up. It's there is a way. I just don't I don't know. I really don't have a good answer on that. To be honest, like, looking at organizations like Reporters Without Borders could help inform perhaps more of the media environment, perhaps places you can look. Um, so I would just start, look at global entities too, like the UN. They may provide reports, country specific. So, just starting to think outside the box. They may not necessarily be strictly news organizations, but look to see who is reporting on the country. Um, and then as far as like, major things such as media, even even GDP, economics, and then from there, you may be able to, identify through those type of organizations, perhaps who to look at. But I just don't. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer.
Yes, I think getting information from multiple sources, maybe it could be a good
Yeah,
solution to this.
You should say multiple contradictory sources to make things
yeah,
clear. Well, I'm not sure how the situation is in the US nowadays, but in my home country, which is basically an average European country, part of the EU, the issue we face is the following. Most people are lost any interest in the media. They just, they watch the news in the evening or maybe in the early morning, and that's it. And I think they don't care that much about how the world is run nowadays. They they don't find politics that appealing. I would say that the vast majority of people in my country are disinterested, you know?
Mhm.
And the problem is that actually, they have access to all sorts of information, which is not what it should be, but they do it as a sort of pastime activity. They gather information about the world when they have fun in the evening, scrolling on TikTok, in Instagram, or all the other, media, social media products, whatever services. And the information they get is sometimes political to a high extent, but they don't see it like that. They see it as, I'm having a great time on my own on the couch. And they are influenced because they show a lot of disinterest. They are influenced to a certain extent. However, those who are knowledgeable and they search for media outlets, most of them they don't watch the news. They don't go on. They do, but they don't trust the news, or the official news, or the magazines. Not the magazines, sorry, the newspapers, the daily newspapers, which are you know relevant at the European or global level or national level. Somehow the same brands. You can see the same brands there. Because we have our local CNN, which is not better than the American one, and so on and so forth. And the thing is that they search for all sorts of NGOs, people who create media, but they do it on their own. And what I notice is that these freelancers, they are influential to a certain extent, but they don't appeal to the general public, since they are not just transparent but also highly knowledgeable. They talk about their biases. They have a lot of, let's say, there's a lot of professionalism in what they do, and somehow the general public is focused on entertainment, and they don't care much if that, for example, I like watching some local media, let's say the creators, media content creators, who are very, very smart people. But the problem is that they don't get to the general public. They are too educated. They present everything in such a way as to entertain you, but also you need to be kind of interested in the subject, about politics, about you need to know that a lot of things about how the institutions, the public institutions work, who are the people behind them, well, the lobby, the lobby side, which is also essential here, like everywhere else, and plus the ideological biases, which some of them explicitly talk about from the very beginning, and others not that much. And I think that the majority of young people nowadays are kind of lost in the maze. They want to find a way out, but there's too much information. Those who offer good quality information require certain intellectual skills, let's call them this way, cognitive abilities, and so on and so forth. And somehow the future of the media is not so clear at this point. That's how I see things. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. I can see
Um,
that we have no questions. So, and we are running out of time. So, I would like, first of all, thank our dear guest, Brittany, for joining us, for taking the time, and for her wonderful and inspiring presentation. So, your insights were really incredibly valuable and inspiring for all of us. And also, uh, I would like to thank our audience. Just stay tuned for our next session in the Informed Voices series, and have a wonderful evening. And stay informed, stay media literate. Dan?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brittany. It was really nice listening to you. Stay safe, stay critical, and see you at our upcoming events. Have a great evening.
Yes, bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. See you.